All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today for the last session of project management training. Today, we are going through project closeout and lessons learned, and our speakers for today will be Mark Kukuvka and Sue Matzat.
Thanks, Kat. So I'm going to start off the session, try to end about 10 minutes to 12, 5 minutes to 12, take a break. And then we'll jump in with Mark with some lessons learned, and then I'll come back and we'll close it out. So, yay, you've made it to the last session. So thank you for being here.
A lot of information in 6 seconds.
So as Kat mentioned, today we're going to talk about project closeout and some lessons learned and process improvement based on those lessons learned. Some of the agenda include, final project summary, which might be a new concept to some managers, how we audit our finances, archiving, everybody's favorite task, and we'll go from there. So, in the previous sessions, we started out with way back about how do you market a client, how do you get that client, the proposal stage, the opportunity stage, and then we won the project. Now we're going to initiate and plan that. We're going to execute it, and then monitor all those changes that occur during the project. And now we're getting to the point where we're going to actually close it out. We've actually created our deliverables. We've handed them off to the client, and that we're done, right? Well, maybe not necessarily. So when we talk about project closure, some of the activities that we think of include, it's noted here as recording of the project documents, but basically making sure that you have copies of or have submitted all of the required deliverables, any of your reports. You've captured any important correspondence, obviously the contracts like we talked about before. And then this is archiving, but again, organizing all of those important process assets like meeting minutes, the schedules that were followed, any important email. If you had a Teams site for your project or a SharePoint site, making sure that we know about that and that we can make sure that that is adequately stored after the project is closed. The collection of and making final payments, and I'll talk a lot more about that. And releasing the resources, all of the staff that you had on the project, making sure they know, okay, time to stop charging the project. Move on to the next one. And every project, whether it's just a single, report that's $1,500 fee or a $3 million fee, teaches us a lesson about, how did the process go? How, who are the people to go to next time for any given service, et cetera. Even if it's a success or not. So, maybe it went way over budget or we didn't meet the schedule. That's something we want to make sure we keep track of so that we can improve on that next time. So we definitely want to make sure that we have appropriate documentation to go back to for future projects that might have those similar or same services. So what are the steps that, at LaBella, we want to try to follow for project closure? So a final project summary, and I'll show you a couple examples of this, but we can do that and we call it CRM or basically Deltek, or even just a one-page written document that's saved in the project management subfolder of your project that kind of, describes some of your scope, schedule, and fee. I mentioned the financials and then archiving of project files. So anymore, there's probably not a lot of paper files, but we can't forget those if you do have paper copies, again, especially of contracts or, reports that you've submitted, drawing sets that have been submitted, correspondence from involved agencies, like we talked about way back in session 3 about, don't forget all your stakeholders. And then one thing that we're never really good at is communicating the lessons learned first to your project team, and then hopefully maybe to your department or to your division. If you can include the client, even better. Get that client feedback, as Brittany mentioned, so that we know what they appreciated or didn't appreciate. Again, always thinking ahead to the next project for either that client or a different client. And we need to understand what our obligations are beyond, giving the client those deliverables. Sometimes if it went to construction, the contractor has a 1-year or 2-year guarantee. We may be tied to that same thing. Again, whatever the contract says, or, sometimes it's the client just expecting that we're going to follow through on that for some period of time to make sure that all of the things that they need to resolve are satisfied. So for small routine projects, we would like the project managers to create a final project summary. And for those of you who may have been involved in proposals, we always put together, what we call project sheets for representative projects or relevant projects. And always in the back of your mind as you're working through the project and closing out the project, what do I need? What am I going to need to know, 5 years from now about that project that, someone else either doing a proposal for that same client will need information on. Like, we are always asked about what were the construction costs of that project, or what was the fee? When did you do it? How long did this given service take? So we want to capture some of that key information somewhere. And we're going to show you a couple of different ways that we have done that in the past. Confirming final payment, that's with any project. I know this is specific to small routine projects, but any given project. And then organizing and saving email. So we do have a piece of software called Newforma that some groups use, and that is really a document email management tool. You can use Outlook, just creating project folders in Outlook, and then being able to save those out into your correspondence folder or some other folder within the project. And then just making sure to coordinate with IT on, if you do have a Teams channel or a SharePoint channel, how they're going to archive and store that for you or future project managers to access any information. I'm going to say also, hopefully not, but in the event that there is some kind of a legal need in the future, as organized as we can make this information, the better. Sometimes if it just gets stored in your inbox and never categorized into your project folder, that's a lot of data that IT would need to pull. Probably a lot of extraneous data that we wouldn't need. So kind of, not that you want to be thinking this, but in the back of your mind, like, if for some reason this, there was some kind of action taken by the client or, by a court, what would they need to know and what wouldn't they need to know? Not to scare you. Hope it rarely happens, which we like it to stay that way, but just in case. So those are kind of the four key things for like a small routine project. But if you have a larger project, there probably are a few more steps that need to be taken. So again, if you're working with stakeholders, public agency, you know, DEC, OGS, et cetera, even the Department of Labor, if there is a construction phase, we need to submit notice of completion for some of those clients so that they can also close the project on their side of things. And they may have specific forms that you will need to fill out. So again, hopefully you've already determined that at the beginning of the project, and now it's just going through the motions of putting in the date, potentially. If you do have a drawing set, you know, record drawings as built. And I think I'm hoping that in the previous sessions we talked about, you know, making sure that you've set aside budget for some of these closeout activities, specifically record drawings, know whether you're going to get markups from a contractor or not, or whether you're going to have to keep track of any changes along the way. Again, the transmittal of any electronic or hard copy documents to the client, and I would expand that to say, and the stakeholders. If you have a joint permit application, make sure you have a copy of that. If they gave you a permit, store a copy of that. And any warranty responsibilities. As I mentioned, you know, again, if most of the time this happens with construction, but it could happen with other activities, you know, post submitting your deliverable, that we are on the hook for to warranty or guarantee what we've designed or produced. And then again, the regular activities that we would do for a small project or any project. So that project summary. So what do we want to capture in that summary? Well, basically what we did, who did it, how did we do, and what should we do different next time? So what did we do? So we don't want to reiterate our entire scope of work, but just enough, again, thinking in the future, when somebody asks you, what did you do for that project? You can say, well, go take a look here, and that'll describe for you in enough detail what we did on that project. And again, if it's a small project, it could be a paragraph. It's large project, it's 5 paragraphs, we'll say. Who did the work? So when we say project team, you know, hopefully it's the client, who is the project manager, what disciplines were involved, what sub-consultants and subcontractors were involved. And we're going to use some of that information. Again, was the sub-consultant someone you would work with again? Or, you know, Mark started out by saying, well, you know, I heard the key point person for this particular sub-consultant just left. You might want to write that down. Or, you know, their key point person is retiring, and so I don't know who's going to do that work for us next time if we work with that sub-consultant. And then how did we do? Again, kind of tracking our original schedule against what the actual schedule was. Same with the budget. Were there change orders, you know, supplementals, and what were the reasons for those? Did the owner request us to do additional scopes of work? Did we have an error or omission? And so we had to, you know, fix that. And again, just a quick, what were the key things that stood out as a lesson learned? And I know Mark will go over a couple of those in a project he was involved with in just a minute.
I think that, you know, the other thing here, we're all busy, you know, and you're hearing this and it's like, oh my goodness, something else at the end of the project. But we're trying to get in a habit of, as managers, to be proactive with this, and so that if we have Deltec open, or we have the closeout form open, we should be thinking about this and adding to it through the life of the project, and doing it just to make it a little easier. The other thing that I've done is I cut and paste a lot of materials, right? And in terms of the project description and the project team and things like that, a lot of that you could cut and paste out of the proposal. You could cut and paste out of the our the RFP, if it's applicable on there. So we're not asking to, this is enough high level information to give somebody, typically happens is years later, time just flies, a synopsis of, what the project was, and, any idiosyncrasies that went on with the project that would be helpful for the next person doing something similar. So I just, so people know, is you're not, don't have to invent this thing from scratch. And then if you do similar projects, with some of those scope of works, if you have a lot of repeat, kind of identical things, then that you can start to cut and paste some of that also. The end results could be all different, but the numbers could be different. But try to keep it simple,
Yeah. So as we mentioned, think about using that for future marketing information. So again, that 5-year rule, if you were asked about a project 5 years after it finished, would you remember what the exact scope was? Maybe. Would you remember the fee and the schedule? Probably not. So it's good to just keep that documented as you go along. Also for project performance evaluation. So, we're always looking at, are we in the right, performing the right services? Are we in the right markets? Are we doing work for good clients or clients that don't pay? So we can use that on a higher level to say, the last 5 projects for this client went terribly. So do we really want to work for that client anymore? Or we have a client that the last 5 projects were amazing, and we had great fee, the teams were very happy working with them. So let's work, propose on more work for that client. Also, as I mentioned, for the subconsultants, there are really great subs and there's not so great subs. Or, we thought this subconsultant was going to do this work for us, but we learned throughout the project that they could also do X, Y, and Z services for us. We're always trying to keep track of, MWBE, service disabled, veteran-owned businesses, and, making note of what status they are so that we can record that for future metrics. And for our QA/QC and our own professional development, you had a junior engineer that just knocked it out of the park. That would be key to note, and be able to share that information. Also, for QA/QC, our client followed these steps. So make sure that you're prepared when you're pulling together the next proposal for that fee, that, leave in that schedule to leave time for those steps for that client. Because maybe you knew they were going to require those, but didn't know the level of detail of, their internal QA/QC until you went through it once.
So I do a lot of proposals, and this hits me all the time, is that we go through a project, and I say 5 years because it's just amazing that how quickly, our personnel changes, or people, like Sue said, people forget things. But on these RFPs, as they're trying to evaluate, LaBella, they'll ask for change order percents. how much, sometimes we don't even track that. You know, they ask for, what was the percent change order? They want to know about errors and omissions, right? I mean, they want to know similar clients and who we worked for and how we did. And if that project manager is gone or working on something else, I mean, it's just it helps build LaBella's database, you know, so that we have better, you know, information, you know, at our fingertips to do this. And build, you know, and capitalize on good client relationships, you know, where we can. But it's it is a valuable tool. I'm surprised how often with proposals we're creating marketing sheets. Nobody took a photo. You know, here we're left or something else like that. I got my senior guys out on site. They're walking away from the project. My projects are an hour or two, 5 hours away, and nobody took a photo. You know, if it's something you could, sure, we'll get a professional out there at some point, but in the interim, it really helps to, you know, to do that and just provide some of this documentation really helps.
And that's a great point, Mark, because, you know, if you can, even when you're in that, you know, vetting out a client, doing go, no go, even then, be thinking about, these are the things that I'm going to need for my project closure, to make sure that even at the proposal stage, you're taking those photos, if it's a, you know, existing, and then, you know, the before and after photos. How many times are we like, well, we've got the after, but we forgot to take a picture at the beginning. So if you're thinking about, what am I going to need at the very end, at the very beginning, now you know, that's the project management life cycle. So I wanted to just show you a couple of examples of the project summary. So this is a project that I led, and what I have done so far is just, if you go into your info center under projects, for those, hopefully it won't take too long to bring up. And then you were to type in the project number in your search bar, it should bring you to the project. And so for this one, I went to background, and just, you can actually either type in or copy and paste in a description right in to Deltek. Here, again, it was just, you know, 2.5 paragraphs, the construction cost, the construction complete date, as an initial, just to get something in there. And that will be saved with the project, with all of the other financial information. You know, those who have charged to the project are going to be listed in here. Any of your sub-consultants will also be listed in. So you can use Deltek as the basis for your project summary, and just, you know, get the information right in there. You can also link it out to the project folder. So you probably don't want to save a bunch of photos into Deltek, so you could link it out and use that to get to your photos. So it could be as simple as that. We also have an example where, let me get to my keyboard here. Mark actually prepared for a large project that he led, an actual report. So, and then we just linked that report into Deltek. So using Deltek as the repository for the information, and hopefully it'll come up here quickly, and I'll move that over to Sarah.
You're going to open it?
Yep.
Right. There you go.
Gotta get it. Gotta get it there. Okay.
So yeah, and so you have a quick summary. You know, I just it probably took an hour to kind of assemble, some of the parts and pieces to it, and obviously in a larger project. And there's a template, right? You can customize the template that we have on the intranet, is where the template comes from. So you're not having to do all that clerical work, so to speak. And then on the next pages here, project summary, I cut and paste that out of our contract. I did that with our initial fees and things like that. This is all part of the project setup. So this was simple enough to give you a quick view of what was included, kind of not included in the project. This was a 1910 courthouse renovation project, major renovation. So we spent $15 million in renovations. So gives you an idea of what it is. It's simpler. So then team members, I had to do some research. I know who the LaBella team members were and the owners were, but as the project grew and changed and things like that, I had to go back to say, okay, if you had to go back and ask a question to somebody about the project, or were hired by the client again to do something else for the project, okay, who are the key people? I'm in the process of that with the Rochester Water Authority project. That's old enough now. It's like, okay, who's left here that worked on the project? And we added the construction managers to the project as resources on there. And then our commissioning, the county wanted to do full commissioning on that. So we added those teams. So the actual schedule, again, I cut and paste the schedule out of our schematic document, probably, is that this was our goal from where we wanted to be, and starting this thing in September of 16 and ending in October of 18. And this report kind of gives a comparative analysis to answer the question, when you hire LaBella, can you do it on time and within budget? And this is part of the on time, review. So then you hire an estimator. So we had, from our initial designs, as we had on here on top, was just cutting and pasting the initial thoughts from the estimate, and then down below was the updated estimate, and then the actual construction costs, from a comparison standpoint. So the projected estimates were, 19.4 million, and the construction cost and soft cost budget, whatever, is 18.69 budget. Now that included, renovations and owner soft costs, because they decided to temporarily move people out of the building. It was a small enough courthouse project that we were either going to work on top of people in a multi-phase project, or do it straightforward and move them out. So the county, to their credit, finessed some ways to move people out of the building to construction. So that probably really helped us. Then the actual schedule, so as we got into it and the complexity of the project, we were hoping to be done about a year or so of construction. And it looked like we, between stumbling across more regulated building materials and some abatements and some lead times and things like that, it got adjusted to March originally, to March of 19, and then finally it was May of 19. They wanted it done, it was 99% done in May, because they wanted to do a celebration of the courthouse at Memorial Day weekend. So something we don't do all the time, but with the construction manager, between the construction manager and LaBella and our new Forma system software, they wanted to start categorizing the project in terms of, okay, what are true architectural engineers' error and omissions? What were error and omissions maybe plus owner requests? What were error and omissions unforeseen? And because the asbestos abatement was such a big deal on the project, we isolated air and emissions plus unforeseen, asbestos, and so we kind of came up with a total, for that. So total for the project overall, I mean, on a tough 110, 15-year-old building, 3%, when the industry standard for a new building is probably 3 to 5%, on a renovation project, it's probably 8 to 10%. I mean, so in my opinion, we really knocked it out of the park in terms of having, 3% total change orders. And then if you really look at LaBella, like we were under, 1.5%, something like that, if you really attribute to what was part of just plain and simply air and emissions. And we did not, they liked us on there, and they did not come after us for any of those air and emissions. And, we gave them plenty of extra design services. So. And our contractors, put our contractors in there. And then, then some of the lessons learned that we had in there. And on an old building like this, it was not difficult to come up with several things. Would you do it differently? I mean, the big thing was, and I know we don't have a lot of, building people, architects, engineers, on this session, but the biggest thing is we took a strategy to try to keep the asbestos that was there, because it's a historic, 1910 building, and work around it. And it just got to a point that the amount of details for the contractors to quickly go and have an abatement contractor there on site all the time. Every time you had to put a screw into the wall, every time you had to tie to the ceiling, every time you had to do something to the floor, you had to have these special conditions. And so we ended up making some major changes and abating a lot of areas to get down to the original courthouse walls and rebuilt them. And so you can quickly see some of the change orders that we wrote on the project. So that was a lion's share. So the lessons learned is it's very difficult or costly to dance around, asbestos abatement, to do that. They decided they wanted these decorative doorknobs, and so the decorative doorknobs that they wanted no longer are handicap accessible, right? I mean, they wanted doorknobs. We have to have levers. This is a public building, so we went back and forth with them to come up with an alternate idea for decorative door plates is what we ended up doing. The other thing to save money, I got stained glass on here to save money. We replaced or fixed or repaired stained glass, the pieces that were broken or missing, but we didn't go back through and say, okay, let's clean, let's restore, let's go back, to the beginning and do the stained glass. So on a 1910 building, probably was a mistake. So they went and went to and actually did a restoration of the stained glass to not only clean it, repair it, but it had sagged over the years, and it was so high up in the air, there was no way, we knew that. So any other, we could scroll down through there, Sue, I don't know if there's any other marquee things, but it's that kind of stuff, underground cables and, sanitary issues and things like that. Just again, good things that you could document to give somebody a heads up on situations and issues maybe to be aware of on their next project. So
Great. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, you can see it could be as short as a couple of paragraphs or as informative as the report on the Madison County Courthouse. It's all a matter of, what you feel is important to share. And obviously I'm going to say whatever you have time for. But if you can at least try to make some time at the end of the project or as Mark said, even during the project, and keep documenting this during the project, then you don't have to do it at the end. Then you won't have to think about it again when somebody from, from marketing says, hey, can you give me information about that project, or, information about that client? You can say, just go here.
And we were able to cut and paste, like I said. I mean, I'm all for efficiency. We were able to cut and paste a lot of that information. So just think about that as you go forward. I mean, you're the best judge of what you need to know.
So financial auditing, big fancy name for just making sure that we've submitted all the invoices we can, that we've been paid for everything we're entitled to, and making sure that any additional fees or change order fees that we've received are recorded in Deltek, so that ultimately what's in Deltek is your true final budget. I know that seems like, well, yeah, why wouldn't we do that? Well, not everybody does that. So, and make sure that, I think you've seen from some of the reports you were shown how to know whether we've been paid or not. So if we haven't received payment on any of our invoices, to collect that outstanding accounts receivable. It is, initially the project manager's job to reach out to the client to understand whether we've been paid or not. It's not accounting's job. However, accounting
90 days, 90 days, Sue, 90 days.
90 days.
90 days. That's what it's our job at 90 days.
Okay. All right. After that, then we ask for help. Okay. If you know that, this is my final invoice, there are charges on the project that are above and beyond my budget, let accounting know to write those off. Don't, just leave them on the project. Eventually they will have to be written off, but it's much better to let accounting know that right then and there, because that's revenue that's been recorded that we're not going to be able to receive. So it's better to know that right away than finding out about it 6 months, a year later, that no, actually we're not able to collect that revenue. Especially consultants, sub-consultants, subcontractors, please make sure to work with them when you're needing to submit your final invoice. Try to make sure that they've submitted all of their invoices, or are there any other charges that you're going to be submitting to us? I can't tell you, it's happened to me where I get an invoice from a sub-consultant, 3 months after I've submitted the final invoice, because, there were additional charges that we didn't realize until after we had that conversation with you. Then you have to, decide, are you going to submit that to the client, or are you going to say, I'm sorry, sub-consultant, we can't pay you for that. Better be proactive, have those difficult conversations ahead of time than afterwards when you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, and you may already experience that. Over the years, there have been some sub-consultants that I've had to, email them or call them on a monthly basis, just from a cash flow standpoint, right? I mean, so are you going to invoice me? I mean, I sit there, I'm amazed that they're not invoicing, and it's sometimes it's the smaller companies who are running around and they're busy and they just forget the invoice, but it can catch us later on from a cash flow standpoint, as Sue was saying.
If there is a construction involved, please make sure that the owner has paid all of the contractor invoices, that there's no liens against that contractor, any subcontractors, suppliers. Again, maybe we're not directly accountable for that. But, you know, in order for the project to be closed out, to know that we're not going to get drawn into some other conversation with a supplier, best to make sure you know with that owner that on their side of things, everything is good also. And then just, you know, as we're doing the project summary, just kind of assessing the budget and the spend, if they were appropriate, you know, by discipline, by service, etc. And, you know, what were those overages or underages? Hopefully there is some under, and it's a lump sum project. So therefore, but good to know, again, just in the future, we only put this many hours to this task, and ultimately it took, you know, twice that. You're going to want to rectify that when you propose on a similar project the next time. So archiving. I think everyone knows why we would do it. When do we do it and how do we do it? So electronic files. So electronic files are backed up if they're on our network. Please save everything on our networks, not on your personal hard drives. I'm sure Kat went over that with you. They are backed up, but we want to try to get them off of our network at some point in time, because we do pay for data storage, especially for projects that are, you know, photo heavy or, you know, ArcGIS, data file heavy. We want to get those off of our normal storage location and put them in an archive location. The archive locations cost us way less than our active storage locations. Our recommendation is to do that a year after the final invoice has been paid, not, you know, when we have submitted it, but when we've been paid. And then hopefully, I know, again, time is, you know, not always easy to find, but if you or someone you've designated can go through that project folder, kind of clear out some of the extraneous files, you know, take out all the ones that are void or old or superseded, and just leave what are the major relevant files. We'll then work with IT to get that project moved to an archived storage location. Same with, you know, now that we have things stored in Teams and SharePoint, we would want to archive any of those team sites also. So basically that's you know, either you or someone you've designated, delegated to, working with IT to say, here's when I want it moved and where to move it to. And then paper files, obviously we still have a few of them around. We do have various people within LaBella administration that do take care of archiving. So contact your office administrator or your office manager, and they can tell you who would take care of that for you in any given office location. We do have a process for, you know, putting things in various folders, and then our archive boxes, and then they will be taken off-site in a secure storage location. We do keep databases of those boxes, so that if you do need to retrieve that information in the future for a, you know, say it's a project on a large, I don't know, I'll call it a hospital campus, and you know, now you're doing work there again, we can retrieve those. We don't want to save everything. I think, again, Kat probably went through this with the records, project records, saving financial documents, contracts, of course, and any of your deliverables, things that you've submitted, any relevant correspondence from, agencies, etc. And then CAD files. On our internet, under tech, design tech, we do have design standards, and one of those standards is an archiving standard. Probably not many of you here use Reddit, but there are specific requirements for files to be the way that they're saved. So talk with your design tech representatives, your technicians, and please have them follow those standards. And then that will get rolled up into those electronic archived folders.
So Sue, if I could ask the group a quick question, do people remember when way back when to session 4, when I talked about building the project record? Did anybody remember what I kind of said was the criteria and what you should be thinking of when you're kind of going through organizing the records and thinking about how we're setting things up in the system, what we're saving? No brave souls today. So
Well, it seemed a lot like what we're talking about here, the same project record files, the major things that we need to look back on, make sure that if we need to look back at design, we can gather that data as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. So it's basically, if you were not here and somebody brand spanking new were to go into the folder, is there appropriate documentation for them to recreate the project timeline, major issues, how we identified them, financial record, the decision tree, submissions, that sort of thing? So it's, that's kind of what the goal is. Think about it. If you weren't here, would somebody be able to go into the folder and know exactly how that project was run and what we did? So thanks.
So we're gonna take a few questions if anybody has any on what's been presented so far. Then we'll take a break and we'll come back and hopefully we'll have a good sharing of lessons learned session for our second half. So any questions on anything so far? Clear as mud, right?
I just have one. How quick is it to get our archive files from IT? Sometimes we're racing to get a proposal out and you're like, oh, there's one that's way back then. Then next thing you know, you're waiting for someone and you got to prep a little farther ahead, I know, but sometimes we don't always have that time to do that.
Is the question paper or electronic?
Electronic, I would say.
Yeah, they're not, okay.
Pretty quick to get a link from them.
Yeah, a link, I've generally been able to get something in a day.
Okay.
I was going to say minimum 24 hours. The older it is, the longer it will take.
Sure.
Because we have stored, before we went to cloud storage, we were archiving on tape. And some of the older tapes, we do have to send out to a service that still, takes data off of those tapes. Some of the more recent tapes we can manage ourselves, and then obviously the newer archival we can grab quickly.
Yeah, I stumped them the other day. I had a project, a LaBella project from 2007, and I gave them a lot of information, and it took them probably 10 days to find it from 2007. But I've had stuff from a couple years ago, and like Sue says, probably less than 24 hours.
Is it electronically filed eventually? The older records, have that been archived where eventually you get the electronic images is sent, or do you get a box of paper?
No, 2007, I was able to get electronic CAD
Okay.
file. Yeah, I was able to get CAD files in 2000.
Although Jeff, to your point, you know, back then you're probably gonna have maybe half and half versus now might be 80% electronic and 20% paper. So you do have to think about, you know, it's possible that contract was only a paper contract. If somebody didn't scan it in and you know, make an electronic copy of it. So just kind of as technology has improved, so have our ability to archive and retrieve.
Yeah, and there was I had to retrieve a LaBella project from, let's say, 1995. And I knew it was drawings. I knew that was paper. And that probably took 10 days to get the paper copy back.
Yeah, the last place I worked at, we start to put everything to electronic files because it just costs less eventually to pay for the storage with the boxes of paper and stuff. So eventually there was a conversion we're still doing, but it takes time to do that and money.
Yes, we have not gone back as a company and said, you know, we're gonna go back 15 years to those boxes and now hire a scanning service, for instance, and convert those all to electronic. At some point, we likely will.
Good question, though.
Any other questions? Thoughts? All right, well, we'll come back at 12:05, if that's all right.
1205, okay? Okay.
All right.
So on this slide, we keep this slide here, but I think the true thing about a lessons learned is I have documented them, and I've had, you know, team meetings and things like that with other divisions and people on there. Is there are things that happen on a project that you necessarily can't control, but they're not really actionable. And, you know, there are things to be aware of. And so I think as you kind of document and we think about true lessons learned, they got to be something that you can action on, that from a result from that lesson, that you can either create better documents, less liability for the company, more profitability if there's less liability and better documents, and a higher quality. I mean, so think about that as you know, and I really appreciate people submitting some thoughts on that, but that's really the end results as we move forward from a QA/QC standpoint. It's really got to be something actionable. So go to the next slide. So some you know, simple examples that are here is and again, this is a project management thing. It is not getting enough comprehensive information in the beginning. It's that, you know, shoot, ready, aim standpoint. I mean, it's you gotta, as a manager, you've gotta be holistic in thinking, and as you're orchestrating the team and who needs to be out when and things like that, it's, you know, you hate to start design or get this thing going along, and I got regulated building materials that I don't know what they are yet. Do I have missing geotechnical information or missing survey information, you know, before getting going? We've lost a lot of money sometimes by, you know, sure, my electrical engineer has some spare capacity. Can I start now? And it's like, no, I'm sorry, you can't start now because I don't have good enough information, you know, for you. Something that I find is sometimes we could be timid by not, you know, accessing all the information, either the building or below ground or digging something up or whatever. Is that we got to be clear with the owner that we may have to punch some holes in this building, or we may have to get some access here it's going to be far less for us to get some access, check above ceilings, check pipe chases. It's going to be far less expensive to do it now than it is going to be during construction. When the contractors are going to open it up, and we're guessing prior to that, and it's just going to cost you at a contractor's rate and to redesign. So it's a good lessons learned is don't be timid. Don't be timid. And if the owner says, okay, no, I don't want you to do that, well, then it's on them, they can have some accountability for that. Contractors or client action to affect our ability to do our work. We made assumptions when we did our contract, and sometimes we're good about taking those assumptions and writing them into the specifications. Sometimes we're not. So a good lesson learned that I have had is if I'm telling the owner on my contract that I'm going to be out to the site X amount of times, I'm going to write that into the contract. So when the construction manager or the contractor now wants me out there more than that, that opens the door for a conversation, with the owner. Is that I'm just chewing up fee this way because I never budgeted. You awarded it. This is a competitive process. You awarded it to me under these assumptions, and the construction manager or the contractor, can't, they can't arbitrarily tell us to do something else without, proper, compensation for that. Utilities, what I have learned, and many of you in the civil business and environmental business, is that it's fine to call before you dig, but they'll only get to come out when you're ready to start construction. And so many times I have now saying, if I see a project that has underground utilities or complicated utilities or something, I'm telling the owner, we got to do ground penetrating radar. We got to go out there ahead of time. We got to be proactive with this. I want to know where this stuff is. I mean, again, you're guessing. It's not any different than the walls and the ceilings. We're guessing where stuff is, and I'd rather spend a little bit of money now than trying to, none of us have time during construction, and everything is a panic during construction. I'd rather do it under a controlled atmosphere than doing it later on. Lessons learned about submitting a building permit. I've just have had instances where on my municipal projects, we usually like to apply for the building permit because I don't want any hiccups when the contractors get going. I want to have the building permit, if not in hand, almost in hand, so that it's a smooth sailing. The last thing you want to do is not apply for the building permit until you're ready for construction or notice to proceed. Then the guy issuing the permit, the agency issuing the permit, they have questions, they have delays, they want you to jump through some hoops. Well, now you're just backpedaling again, to do that. And keeping the client informed, we assumed. I mean, and a lesson learned that constantly happens. I talked about it a little bit in session 5. Is part of the thing with the clients is educating the clients. I mean, some of our clients are sophisticated clients. They've been through this rodeo before. They know what to expect. They know what to do. A lot of my municipal clients, they're not. The smaller counties, the smaller towns, the smaller cities, they haven't been through this before. So they assume we do everything, and that obviously costs us money. And so a lot of the thing is educating the clients as we go along. Safety is the other thing I think under lessons learned is LaBella now has a safety group. I mean, we didn't years ago. I came on board with LaBella in 2003, and it was kind of best practice, on doing that. But I think with the heightened awareness, with the PPEs, with the educational programs we're going through, as managers, I think we have some responsibility to, again, as we're orchestrating these projects, to at least ask some good questions before our people go out in the field. You know, don't assume the clients and the owner have already made the work site safe. I mean, it just takes some phone calls. It just takes some preparedness for that, so that we're not sending our people out. I mean, again, my projects are all over the state. I've sent a guy out an hour and a half away, he had to turn around and come back. You know, it's just because they weren't ready or something wasn't, you know, safe or whatever it was, you know, and, you know, to do that. Know the hazards, you know, is, you know, again, you don't have to be the expert, but you gotta collect information from our team member experts. And so that, you know, we know the hazards, what PPE should they have, what should they be prepared. And it, you know, so I think as a general PM, you know, you care about the project, our team, and you had some due diligence on our part, you know, before we send them out.
Just to build on what Mark is saying, you know, if anybody on this call, or you know of anybody that needs help, you know, before we go on any project, we need to do a health and safety plan. We've got a short form on the internet we can use. I can show you how to do that on a separate call if you guys want to, if you want to do that. But I'm also happy to talk with you all individually and talk about, you know, some of the training that's needed, like confined space, for instance, like unless you've had the training, you can't go in. So there's just certain things that you know, and it is up to the PM to make sure that the PM and the staff manager make sure the staff are in a position where they're not doing something they shouldn't be doing. So just give me
Yeah, again, I don't think that the PM has to be the expert on the training. You just got to ask the question. Have you been trained? Have you gone? And then then obviously we'll figure it out, you know, to do that. I mean, I've been on lifts, I've been on things, I've had harnesses, and sure, I've had to run through some quick orientations again, because I don't do it all the time, but once in a while you have to do that. So we were going to take a minute. So that just gives you a kind of a refresher here a little bit on doing that. But we're going to call on some of you. We really appreciate it. We've been doing this quite a while now, Sue. So you see some constant themes that come up, and the constant themes on lessons learned that come up help us to kind of, as we forge forward, is, you know, these are continued concerns that we need to bring to everyone's attention. But Jake White, you want to run over some of the thoughts you had on lessons learned?
I don't see him on the call, Mark.
Jake's not on, and
Nope, I don't see him here.
okay,
Sorry, Mark.
all right. Then we're gonna. How about Courtney?
I don't see her on either.
Oh, we're not doing great.
And they. How about Charlie?
I'm on.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had an instance, the one that I submitted, that I had an instance where we were doing a big wetland restoration project in Western Kentucky, and we had gone through the contract already, and there was a subcontractor for doing the dirt work. So actually building levees, doing some ditch plugging, a lot of earth moving involved. And it was getting late spring, and they were getting behind. We had a lot of rain, and these were fallow row crop fields. So they had a couple months of growing season on them. So a lot of the weeds and other stuff had started coming up in that corn stubble or bean stubble. And, you know, the contractor was supposed to get out there and first disc before they could start actually pushing dirt and stuff. So it was a better dirt for moving dirt. You didn't want a bunch of weeds mixed in. It wouldn't compact right. But that's the little backstory. But essentially, after talking to the contractor, and they were dragging their feet, and we were getting later and later in the season, it was a big project and wanted to get it rolling. I told them that we would, since we had tractors and discs on the WMA that I manage, I said, hey, I'll go and disc that for you guys so we can get this ball rolling, because they just kept telling us that they couldn't get out there. And I told them they need to get out there sooner because it's just going to take longer. You know, and I myself was kind of in a hurry and wanted to get stuff rolling. So I just kind of verbally agreed with them, and then spent a whole day, you know, disking these fields for the contractor who was supposed to do it. The lesson learned ultimately was at the end of it, because we didn't have any kind of documentation or anything in writing from that, the contractor pretty much played me and didn't want to take it off of the the bill for that. They would still want to get paid for it. And I really didn't have any recourse other than just like his word versus mine. So, not a huge mistake. I mean, it was a day's work. We already had the equipment. It wasn't like we had to go rent something, but it was just kind of a lesson learned from then on that get stuff in writing, document things, and don't assume the best in people sometimes.
Yeah, it's on my public projects, it's probably all projects on my public projects, especially versus a developer project or a design build project is, I will agree to something verbally, but I follow up in writing. Is it, before you do that, I mean, you're protecting LaBella's interest is what you're doing, So I'm a big email when I say paper. A big email guy is, making sure we're all on the same page. So. And George on employee skill sets is George. Yeah, George is on. Lessons learned with it, as I read through yours.
Yeah. One of the things I ran into, coming here, I've only been here for 4 months, but I work in survey. And I've always been kind of a staunch about like letting the guys know how much time, we have budgeted for any given project, but, and let me preface, by saying like the guys that I've run into here are extremely talented. They have their skill sets are kind of above a lot that I've seen over my many, many years of land surveying. So, but one of the things I did encounter is it's from giving them a time frame. I've found that some of the guys will take that time frame as a challenge to possibly complete the project beforehand, to kind of save on the budget, and then others may see it a little differently in that they've been given 10 days, they utilize that 10 days, and then if something does go amiss, we have nothing left, and we end up with that dreaded scope creep, because if there is a problem and they need to go back, then now we don't have any additional time to do that within the scope. So the other end of it is getting to know your guys and understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. I feel is important as well, just to help better guide them, and then also how to utilize them. And I think if we know how to utilize, then, and we know their weaknesses, we can also train them in a growth environment as well. So that's something I encountered. So I just
Yep, and especially as you're newer here and doing that, but that's no question. Is it who's the team member on there? And I talked about a little bit of that in session 5 is getting the right skill sets, getting the right people, on the project, is that, like you said, who can handle it in the time constraints that we got. Cameron, do you feel like, I thought that was some good insights there. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, sure. So my experience with a previous company, I also haven't been here very long, but we had some project monitoring, asbestos project monitoring going on. I was quite busy over the summer with school projects. We had, tons of projects going at the same time. A monitor that I had some good trust with was working on a project, and me being busy, I was kind of jumping around to other projects, doing field work myself. Wasn't getting any response from them how the project was going, things like that. So just kind of assumed that it was going well, and that's kind of an issue that led to more problems. He had some issues on site because I didn't know about it for a week or 2, 3 weeks. Those issues grew, became bigger problems, ended up taking up more of my time to resolve those issues, and just led to, more scope creep, more on-site time, and more delays in the project. So kind of checking in on your projects, even when everything's going well, or you're not hearing anything, you're assuming everything's going well, getting out there to the field, calling, the employees, kind of asking how everything's going, if there is any issues, if they're seeing anything, becomes incredibly important.
To go along with our Incredible Hulk opening slide is there's a spidey sense that I have that if it's too quiet, it's like having little kids, right? If it's too quiet, something's going on. If things are going too smooth, I better check in. It's been too long. I haven't heard anything, right? And then so you just develop that over the years. And I'd rather check in and have people. I mentioned it. We were kind of talking with Sue a little bit, but trust is something that is earned. It's not given, and it's not trying to be mean or anything else like that. I mean, we're here for the interest of the project and for LaBella, and you just got to do that, right? There's some people you could turn your back on over the years. You know who they are, but there's other people that just need a little hand holding. They need a little attention, on doing that. So. And Chris Enright, I mean, a simple thing, but I think that you want to share that at all about know the scope. Don't you have a microphone?
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm pretty new to the managing, and for the most part, I just kind of manage jobs that I work with. I don't really have other people that I have to worry about. So I know for me, a lot of stuff that people have talked about, just knowing the scope, what the client is expecting from you, and then being able to deliver the deliverables to them when they are expecting them or earlier. And I always try, like I think it was George that was just saying I always try to come under budget with time and stuff, because you never know if something else is going to come up. And so I always like to try to plan ahead so I don't have to have any of those issues.
Yeah, and it is. I think as managers, so many times that we're given a project, right? We don't create them. And it's just that little bit of due diligence is as much as I do similar work around the state, there's always twists and there's always something a little different. This client wants something just a little different, whatever it is. And it's just knowing that scope ahead of time. Number one, to keep the client happy, idiosyncrasies with the client. And number two, it's sensitizing us to what's in scope and what's out of scope, doing that. So good.
Mark, I think Jeffrey Leibowitz had a comment he might want to share also in the chat.
Okay.
Jeff, did you want to share your comment with everyone? It was a great comment.
Yeah, sure. So I've been kind of used to just managing projects and work for myself for the most part, but now I have sometimes too much work, so I have to give some work to younger members of our team, and just knowing your project's budgets, because some clients project budgets are much tighter than others, and getting to know your team members' skill sets to know, hey, this is a younger person, they can maybe spend a little bit more time on certain projects and it could still come under your exposed your project budget, or I've seen where we've put some younger people on projects with tighter budgets and maybe overlooked that and ran out of budget because they spent too long, or they don't have the necessary skill set to get the work that we needed done within our time frame that we need. I've noticed on some circumstances we've made that mistake and maybe put the wrong person on that project, where maybe they're coming into it new and should have been put on either a different project to learn those skills, or spent more time training those skills rather than sitting on that project. So those are just some of the things that I've learned recently on projects that I've worked on, or my own projects in general.
Yeah, and the reverse has happened to me too, is that we're busy, everybody's tapped out, and I've had to put a more expensive person on my project. And you got to be aware of that from a budget standpoint, is you get that first building review and it's like, oh my goodness, they're burning through my budget. I never planned for this. You know, they're burning through my budget like crazy. So they better be, if they're a higher budgeted person, they better be lean, mean, and be able to, get it done, fairly quick. So I think Jake White, I'll just read, the essence of his, it was, managing the client and education to the client and creating that client relationship. I mean, so he worked very diligently. It was a difficult contractor, and things were not, going as smoothly as they could, but he was very diligent on keeping the owner aware of what was going on. So on a regular basis, earn that trust with the owner. And so when they, got the bad news or had to start thinking about alternatives approaches, the client was much more receptive and working with LaBella in order to resolve the situation versus just, oh, it's your fault, or it's your fault, or contractor fault, or you're not due more money or something else like that. So that client relationship is so important to advancing the projects. And I want to work with my owners to give them regularly good news. So when I give them bad news, they're not always hearing bad news. So just like you're treating your monthly reports or quarterly reports with the managers at LaBella, you want to give them periodic good news so that when they get bad news, it's like, oh, well, here comes Mark again. You've got some other sob story to tell me, so you want to give them good news periodically. So that's good. I really appreciate that. I think that a lot of the reoccurring themes that, I have seen on our other sessions is don't assume, that gets us in trouble a lot. Know your employees, client education. One of the things that I have seen is when you assign a project to somebody, they're a senior person. I didn't think they needed a lot of communication. And again, that falls under the don't assume standpoint, is just because there's a senior person and they have good technical skills doesn't necessarily mean they have good time skill management. And, I've been burned, with that, is that, well, hey, you're a senior guy in the group. You should be able to do this. You should. But I just find all in all, it's the squeaky wheel, us as PMs, it's the squeaky wheel that become more profitable and can get projects done on time. It's being polite, it's not being mean, but it's just staying in front of people and holding people accountable. So one more slide here, Sue. Sue, or whoever's advancing now. Other things is, I just mentioned, communicate on there. I have found that it's been very good to hold, and it depends upon your project, of course, but to hold post-mortem walkthroughs with the owners and brainstorm on what we could have done better. A lot of my contracts have a 1-year walkthrough, an 11-month walkthrough afterwards. Been very educational. So you're critiquing this as much as you can in-house, but it's good to hear from the owner's perspective on getting. They'll sometimes share with you, I really like this employee. I didn't like this employee. Something like that, and it can help us be more sensitive and be better managers going, into the future. I think with some of the projects, that you're doing, if they're smaller projects on the environmental side and the landfill side, you may want to group them. If you have similar clients under that, is you can look at the last 4 or 5 projects or something like that. What trends am I seeing that we could do better? What trends are the same things happening over and over again that are problems for us that we just need to step up and talk to our superiors and say, hey, we got to do this differently. This just isn't working, to do that. And let's face it, we're trying to, as I said in the beginning, we're trying to translate these lessons learned into eliminating mistakes and becoming, more profitable and eliminating our errors and omissions. So.
And a reminder for everybody that as another option, Brittany McPhee is available to reach out to our clients at any point during the course of a project, including at the end of a project, to take a temperature, to talk to them about what they liked, what they didn't like, and get some of this information. If for some reason you're not in a position where you can do it firsthand, like Mark's talking about, Brittany is another option.
Right, that's true. That's true. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mark. So why do we care? Why do we ask you these questions? Why do we want to learn about the lessons learned? I think on the bottom of that last slide, it was pretty clear. We have to know what our mistakes are so that we can correct them, right? So our quality management team is working on collecting all of these lessons learned and trying to categorize them to then be able to have resources for you as project managers to kind of work through those things, right? When I have this issue, what's available to me to make sure that doesn't happen again, or to work through it if it's something that still needs to be worked through. So when you talk about ISO and formal quality management systems, these are classified under non-conformances. So something that is a deviation from your spec, the standard, or the expectation. So typically they're categorized in 4 categories of seriousness. So we would obviously, if they're classified as critical, that's something that we have to make sure that we address so that it doesn't happen again for future projects. And this slide just kind of lists out some of those common causes, and Mark went through with you what he's seen from all the lessons learned that we've started to capture. Communication, as everybody is painfully aware, is going to be top of the list. So how are we going to help you as project managers? How are you going to help your teams get better at communication or miscommunication? So some clients also do rating or scoring. So I know, I'm not sure if they still do, but the New York State DOT at the end of a project would provide that consultant team a rating sheet, and they would have different categories and score you on those different categories. And they would use that to then decide whether they would hire you again or not. I know they're not the only client that does that. And obviously we want to pay attention to those things and improve our scores. So we are checking and recording non-conformances. So we would appreciate that as you go along with your project summaries, your project closure reports, or just as an email to Kat, Mark, myself, Heather, any of the team here that's been presenting the sessions to send those along. We'll document those, put them in a log, and then eventually we'll continue to work on the delivery of our training, the tools that we have available, try to make them we'll help you if you help us, and we'll disseminate that knowledge to not only just all of our project managers, but our future project managers and all of your team members. And we would appreciate that you spend some time with your team members, again, with the the postmortem or even throughout the project, just talking to them about things that are occurring on the project. You know, they may not know that you've had a certain conversation with a client. So you're aware, but are you making sure that the team is aware? Because they can't correct things if they don't know about them, right?
Some of these are going to be by discipline. I mean, that's what we have done a little bit is that we've categorized them. I mean, for those in the K through 12 group or those in the municipal group and, you know, the environmental group, et cetera, you may want to, you know, bundle some of those non-conformances are very applicable to what you do. So yes, they can be shared to all of us, but you want to make sure you certainly share them amongst your group.
I did want to mention that with our new learning management system that we have, we're in the future, we will have an opportunity within that system to set up a place for us to upload information to, such as this, and also for us to, a place for us to ask questions and share information about project management. So that's kind of all in the works. I'm sure some of you have kind of seen the new learning management system already, but I want to put my little plug for some of this will be in the new learning management system as we move forwards.
Yeah, so we want to leave you from these sessions with the thought of, you know, continuously improving. We're going to improve how we manage projects, the process that we use to manage those projects, the experience that our client and our team have, and you as project managers, so that you can feel good about, like, yeah, I did an awesome job on that project. And, you know, obviously, if we can improve, then we're going to hopefully bring in more profit, we'll be more efficient, but most importantly, that everyone will have more fun doing what they like to do. And that's really the key. So we would leave you with this, that we hope that you will recognize your team. Again, whether it was a successful project in your mind or the client's mind or not, people made an effort to help you produce the work that needed to be produced. So take some time, if it's during the project or after the project, to recognize those efforts. Be clear on what you're recognizing so that they know, hey, this was important to the outcome of this project, so they do it again. And be invested in that appreciation. You know, if you're going to hold a reception or happy hour for your team, make sure you're there. I know you will. And it doesn't have to be, it can be any kind of, you know, just a written recommendation to their manager or their division director. You know, however you see, just like, you know, Brittany talked about with various ways that we might, you know, reach out to a client, you can do the same with your project team members.
I think the other thing, my only other discussion on that is, and it all depends upon how fast or slow your typical projects are, but many times I find that I need to do those team recognitions like at the end of design. You know, years ago I used to wait till, well, let's wait till the end of the project, but the end of the project could be so long way and it's just so drug out as everybody's forgotten and everything else like that. So a lot of times at the end of design or a major milestone or something else like that, that's a good time for some recognition. And if it was a significant project, I mean, I'm sure LaBella with your managers, you can order a pizza or do something or bring people together just to say thank you. I mean, essentially that's what it is. You're trying to, you know, build more camaraderie with LaBella and your team members and things like that. And then at the end of the construction project or something, if it makes sense, you could do something again.
Are there any examples anyone has, you know, they've done themselves or have experienced from, you know, receiving that, you know, were meaningful to you that you would share?
I ordered a food truck mean, I've done a few things. I've ordered a food truck, had it come during COVID, right? So we had a major project go out during COVID. We're all nervous about 6 feet apart and everything else like that. And so I had a food truck come out back, and I bought so many of these pizzas or whatever from the food truck, and we all met in the back parking lot and handed them out and things like that. Because I just wanted to do, something. This was the design went out for, it was $100 million, project, so I just wanted to do something. So that's just one example, but I've certainly done things in-house. If some could be a box of donuts, I mean, it could be something, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be, anything, spectacular. So if you haven't done something, we should be thinking about it.
For our team, we have a player of the week trophy. This is for a more week-to-week kind of thing. It's actually an old baseball trophy. And for anybody who goes above and beyond, we would award them the trophy at the end of the week. Sometimes it's for a silly thing like, who tripped going up the hill or, something like that, if nothing major happened that week. But they have fun with that. And whoever gets it that week decides who is going to get it the next week. So fun little thing.
Good.
Well, I would encourage you as project managers and those that other project managers you work with, to be creative and to think about what you can do to make it more meaningful for yourselves and your team members and your clients. So that's all we have for today. And again, we really appreciate you attending our sessions. Hopefully you got something out of each one of them, and hopefully it will help you in your future projects. So Heather will be sending out a survey, and again, we appreciate your time.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.